Hi everyone, and welcome to our video on newsletters. Now that we've explored the different types of articles that exist in traditional news providers' papers and websites, let's explore newsletters. We need to think about what a newsletter is and who it is for. On a very basic level, of course, a newsletter is a source of news. In terms of more specific detail, however, the who informs the what. Firstly, who will read it? An audience internal to the business or organisation, or an audience external to the business or organisation, or both? And remember the point I made in our genre video, that target audience and readership are not always the same. So it is always worth bearing in mind that a newsletter may be read by someone it was not intended for. Secondly, whose voice should a newsletter represent? Newsletters can be a form of what is called controlled communication. That is, communication that represents the voice of the management and disseminates management information to the workers or the organisation's information to the members. The flow of the information in this case is downward from above. On the other hand, newsletters can be a form of what is called two-way communication, where there's a mixture of management voices and the voices of workers or members, voices from the ground, as it were. With this format, the direction is upwards as well as downwards. In reality, most internal newsletters are going to be controlled to a certain extent, with editorial choices being made about what precisely to include from the upward aspect of the communication. It really depends what decisions have been made about the purpose of the newsletter, what types of articles are sought from the wider body of colleagues or members, and whether it is edited by management or by a person or people in the wider body of the business or organisation. Who a newsletter is for and whose voice it represents will inform which register you use. If you were tasked with writing or editing a regular newsletter for the business or organisation you worked for, you might wonder how you would possibly find enough content. But if you think laterally, there are plenty of things to write about, and you don't need to create everything from scratch. The main piece in each newsletter will be the latest, biggest news about the business or organisation. Beyond that, however, there are lots of options. You could have regular features, before and after pieces that illustrate your organisation's work, how-to pieces, or recommendations for products or services. Another great area to draw on for content is wider news. Is there something in the local, regional, or national news at the time you're writing that is relevant to your business or organisation? Is there an economic downturn in your area of work that you can comment on or think about creative ways to tackle? Or is there new legislation coming into play that you can explain in the context of your business or organisation? Or has a sports person or celebrity recently done something relevant to your business or organisation, whether that be work, a donation, or volunteering, for example? Anytime that you're using something else in the form of wider news, or if you're picking up on, say, a how-to piece from another website, always acknowledge that website. You don't need to reference in the same way as you would in a scholarly piece of work with, your brackets and your Harvard referencing and things like that. But you should put like a little footnote at the bottom about where you have got the content from. Finally, depending on the context, it can be good to include some fun stuff. For example, an announcement of a social event or coverage of a social event that has already happened. or an employee or member's profile or similar. Baskin and Aronoff suggest a very useful percentage breakdown of content for newsletters. They were writing quite a long time ago, to be fair, but newsletters are not a genre that changes significantly over time, and this breakdown is still relevant and still useful. Why not pause the video and note these down, or again take a screenshot for your notes? Baskin and Aronoff suggest 50% information about the business or organisation, 20% employee or member information such as benefits of employment or membership, key recent member activities, etc., 20% relevant non-company or organisation information. This could be about competitors or the wider community or the recasting of bigger news that I mentioned a moment ago. And they suggest 10% personals or fun stuff. You might also wonder about how to lay out your newsletter. Some of this information is not terribly fascinating compared with discussions of content and style, but it is important, so make sure that you take it on board. Before I start with the rest of this, first of all, I would reiterate that for the purposes of this module, detailed design issues are not relevant and are not crucial. It's not a graphic design module, and you do not need to suddenly turn into a graphic design whiz when you haven't yet studied that area. However, there are simple layout elements that you do need to get right for this module and that are very straightforward to achieve. Firstly, you should present your work in 2 or 3 columns per page. You can format this in columns via the page layout menu in a Word document. Secondly, write in 8 or 10 point font, except for headlines, which can be a little bigger. This might seem small, but if you have a look at any newspaper, or indeed newsletter, you'll see that it's pretty standard for them, and it's a way of getting quite a lot of information into a small area. This is particularly important if you want to send out a hard copy newsletter. For example, if you wanted to keep it to 2 sides of A4, say. But it's important for online as well. Your spacing should be at least 1.25. Again, this is easy to format on a Word document in line spacing in the paragraph section. Using bite-sized breakout boxes is a great way to highlight or prioritise the most important information, and it also keeps the layout engaging for the reader, especially given you're working in smaller font. Similarly to my advice about reading more news to improve your news story writing, I'd encourage you to engage with multiple newsletters to get a feel for how different businesses and organisations approach them. Whilst you may not personally receive many newsletters, it's easy enough to find examples online. Indeed, I'm going to ask you to do an after video task considering some newsletters that I've provided for you in this week's folder. You will notice from looking at different newsletters that there are nuances in how they're presented. In particular, there is a continuum of whether their news articles are very neutral, like broadsheet news or press releases, or whether they contain more colour and warmth to their language with more of a tabloid style. You should feel free to make the choice of where your news for your newsletter should sit on this continuum. Think about the character and overall register of your business or organisation and what style and level of warmth would suit that. And make sure that if you go for warmth and colour, you don't tip over into emotion and persuasion in the news stories. Again, other than in quotes where emotion and opinion are welcomed. Here's the task I would like you to do after the video. And remember, reading other newsletters will help you to become a better newsletter writer. I'll post some of my thoughts about the newsletters once enough time has elapsed for most of you to have done the task. I hope you've enjoyed exploring newsletter writing with me in this video. See you in next week's videos.